The Ultimate Secrets of Center to Edge Aiming Part 2. And yes, in this video I really am going to give you the best secrets of center to edge aiming. The information that I'm going to share though is nothing more than the finer points of how my knowledge has deepened over time during my journey of comprehensively working with CTE. CTE is always going to get easier as you move along during your journey, and your understanding is always going to deepen. That's very important because we all are familiar with the concept of it's difficult to explain what's happening at that high level of skill that occurs among professional players. Pool is a visual, physical game, and the perfect set of words is hard to have when it comes to what are the pros doing. Even when you ask the pros, often they'll say, I don't know what I'm doing. That doesn't mean they're not expert and quite masterful at what they're doing. It just means that the language intelligence does not have the words for what's going on with the visual physical. Center to edge aiming changes that. CTE is objective, and therefore over time one can work with that objectivity and develop a set of words, a set of rules, a set of steps and processes that occur that can allow you to tap into the professional approach of how to really play this game. Now in part 1 I executed 8 shots. The odd shots 1, 3, 5, and 7 were traditionally played shots. The odd numbered shots 2, 4, and 6, 8 were shots that were played with a half ball pivot. They were shots that were played with a disguised pivot. In other words, when you watch the pro play, I'll highlight that again. It's difficult to tell. Are they coming from the traditional approach, or are they coming from the center to edge type approach, which I'm going to get into right now. I want to call your attention one more time to the fact that when you have a zero angle shot, you can aim at the contact point. Isn't it nice when you can aim at the contact point on a straight in shot? Even though straight in shots can be a pill for all of us. But we love to aim at that contact point. Well, if you like to aim at the contact point, you're going to love CTE, because that's exactly what happens. Something that was never even supposed to occur in this game. The very idea that you can aim center ball at the contact point is something that's not heard of. So, here's how that happens. When we get into a cut shot position here, I'm going to just assume the traditional approach and explain to you very simply what happens. I'm going to get behind the center of the cue ball, and I'm going to refine my vision right behind the center of the cue ball. I'm looking straight down the shaft as if I'm aiming down a rifle, and I'm right past the contact point. Now my experience and judgment tells me that I can make that ball. So, and I play well with this traditional approach. I've run 100 balls that way. I've also run 100 balls with this center to edge approach. The potency of the center to edge approach compared to the traditional approach, it's on 2 completely different levels. CTE is on a different plane and in a different dimension compared to the traditional approach. And I think with what I explained to you, I think you're going to see that that's absolutely true. And then once you can connect to it with your experience, then you will have knowledge that it's true, beyond any shadow of a doubt. I'm going to just take this shot right here. That's a 15 to the inside, and I'm going to explain an inside pivot in a little more detail. I have a 15. I'm going to establish that 15 perfectly right here. My cue looks normal here. I'm sighting down my cue. Now I'm going to pivot my cue to center, and this is where everything changes. when I go to center, the cue is slightly across my face, there's a slight distortion here, and I was aiming at the contact point. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to aim at the contact point? And you can do so. You know, your CTE perceptions, 15 and 30, make all zillion shots on the surface of the table and typically into the pocket that you want it to go to. So you're going to get to aim at the contact point for those type shots. Now when we get into the thinner one-line type shots, we know what happens there. Once that tip gets out in space, our tip's not really pointed at anything, and therein lies the reason why the one-liners are tougher. It's because you don't have that contact point to aim at out in space. So once again, I can shoot this shot and I can disguise my pivot. I've got a 15, I'm going to come from the outside, I'm going to sweep from the outside. Where am I going to sweep to? I've been asked that question a lot. Where do I sweep to? Now I can explain it 100%. You're going to sweep right to center cue ball so that your tip is pointed at the contact point. That means your arm is going to be in the pivoted position. It doesn't get any better than that. It doesn't get any stronger than that. This is an evolutionary process. So when a player, you can find pro players that sweep into the ball and use the traditional approach. Perhaps they're not dialed into the CTE end of things. You can take a new CTE Pro 1 player and they'll sweep into the traditional approach because that's what they're used to. So on this 15 and outside here, I'm going to sweep right into the traditional approach. So how do I do that? I'm just going to come right in. I'm aiming 100% directly down my cue. Just do right past the contact point because of the nature of spheres for pocketing that ball. So I think that's probably the biggest secret of center to edge aiming. There's a group of players out there that know that you can take a slight distortion of your cue. In some way they're passing this around among their little fraternity. They must be. I'm not the only person that's unraveled this to this degree. They know that there's something special there. You can see this ball in such a way that you can aim at the contact point even though it's a cut. So I'm at center. I'm aimed right at the contact point. Now, how you develop all of that is by putting things in order. You can take my latest work, the final chapter, and that lays everything out in the most singular place in a very comprehensive manner. You learn your manual pivots, you learn your sweeps, and then you evolve into exactly what is happening here. You will evolve into it naturally, or you can evolve into it quicker if you avail yourself to this knowledge. So what I'm trying to do is shorten your learning curve. You know, there's something else that I want to touch on very quickly because I'm constantly at the table working with center to edge aiming by myself and with students. I have a lot of experiences with other players that are, you know, terrific, and you know, any instructor knows that there's an exchange of knowledge a lot of times when you're teaching. So you know, teaching is not just a one-way street. My mind is always open. Just recently, I had the pleasure of working with a golf professional on the instructional side of things, and I worked with this individual a couple of times thus far. And he said, you know, it's common knowledge in golf that you see with curves. And I'm thinking, what? I've always been on sort of the mental block of you can only see in straight lines. But when he said that, I immediately had to set up the shot and take a look at something that I've noticed over time, but I've never had the language intelligence to pull out and express the right way. So now I can see this just as plain as day. Now I don't know if I'm really seeing in curves, but there are certainly golf professionals out there that are aware of this concept, and it's very likely in some way that this is having an effect on how you aim and center to edge aiming. I know that once I put this concept in place, I could see what was happening. So for example, on this 15 and inside, my tips on the inside, well, I can see perfectly right through here a curve lined right into that contact point for pocketing that ball. So that makes my pivot, easier, because once I pivot to center, now my cue is actually aimed at that contact point that is representative of where the curved line took me to. So I'm constantly after this. In contrast to some that take a look at CTE in a very cursory fashion, in a very cursory manner, and they'll say, well, CTE doesn't work. And they won't give you a reason, or they won't give you a shot or anything like that. And then 3 or 4 years later, they'll say, well, CTE won't work, and they still can't give you a shot. So their knowledge is really expanding. CTE won't work, and then a few years later, the same words come forth, CTE won't work. That CTE can't happen. So that kind of language is sort of a stagnant, dormant kind of thing, because it's going to remain that way until a person allows themselves time to get on the table, to engage in what's happening visually and physically, what's really happening visually and physically, and CTE can certainly put you on the right path of understanding what's occurring from these players that are playing with an offset. Top players are playing with an offset. That means they're pivoting into their shots in some way. That pivot can be turned as a half ball pivot. There are certain things that are happening with the eyes because of that I have explained. So, once again, thank you so much for your attention and your interest in center to edge aiming. Your support has been terrific, and these two little videos concerning the secrets of CTE, this is just a special gift from me to those of you around the world that are paying attention to the center to edge aiming system. I'm wanting to keep everybody up to speed. I'm not going to withhold anything. Thank you very much.